Vertus Verbis Podcast disclaimer. The information presented in this podcast is for entertainment, informational and educational purposes only. It is not intended as legal, professional, or financial advice and should not be construed as such. Content and topics shown or discussed may not be accurate nor up-to-date information. Laws and regulations change frequently and vary by location, jurisdiction, and by nation. You should consult with a qualified legal or financial professional for advice specific to your situation. Listening to this podcast does not create an attorney-client relationship. The views expressed by the host and guests are their own and do not reflect the views of the podcast as a whole. The host is not responsible for any errors or omissions in the information provided or for any actions taken based on the content of this podcast. We are not liable for any losses, damages, or consequences arising from the use of this information. By listening to this podcast, you agree to hold the host and any guests harmless from any decisions you make, or from any losses, damages, or other claims arising from your use of this information.
All right, we are live. So,
Sounds good.
of late there's been a lot of news, and then this whole year has been pretty exciting so far. From your perspective, what's something that you've heard of recently that piqued your interest, or you thought, that's something that definitely is worth talking about?
Wow. As of lately, I mean, obviously with the market kind of going the way it did, and witnessing a so-called crash, it just kind of puts things into perspective of, there's just always volatility, right? I don't know if I'm sure it's a recent topic for a lot of people that are thinking or newer to Bitcoin. And in retrospect, we always say just want to get in more when it's a lower price and things like that. If one thing kind of comes up to mind though right now would be, I guess, just kind of like seeing. I don't even know if the news is really important anymore. I mean, there's always good news and bad news, but it doesn't really change how things are going. I don't know. I think it's a time of just kind of sitting tight and just kind of seeing where things go. What do you think about the recent news and stuff going on?
I think and for folks that are listening, I think what we're referring to is the Bank of Japan cash carry trade crash, right?
Yes.
And to your point, like there's speculation from people saying, hey, it was started by Warren Buffett because he sold half his Apple stock, and I find that pretty hilarious because it's like sure, no doubt. I wouldn't doubt that Warren Buffett has, people in the right places, and even regardless from I think from their potential business standpoint, they would have to be ears to the ground, always keeping eyes and ears on everything just to kind of be able to make profit or to mitigate risk, right?
Yeah.
So for him to make a substantial position change, that's expected. It's just that I think people on the outside, as they're watching, they're like, oh, this is huge. And it is huge. But at the same time, I think a lot of people are also like looking to Warren Buffett to monitor his trades, or Berkshire Hathaway, right? What they're doing to kind of to gain insight. But of course, we all know by the time you see an action, it's already too late. There's no way to follow that, right? And so a lot of the talk was, I think for when that news was out, a lot of people were kind of wondering why. And I think to this day, it's still not clear what exactly the reason is, right? And then of course the BOJ cash carry trade crash happened soon after, and then a lot of people started trying to tie those two together. So I mean, I think that's very interesting, narrative wise. But again, I don't know if we'll ever get a clear, decisive answer as to what exactly was the cause. I know for a fact that, from reading it on Twitter, X, or whatever you want to call it, the cash and carry trade has been an ongoing thing, especially with Japan's massive debt, right? It's not new. I mean, they've been, from what I understand, they've been doing it for a decade. So for us to even see something now, I mean, that's pretty amazing. I mean, how long can you pull off something like that? 10 years or more?
Well, I think it's two things with the Japan part. From what I've watched online and things like that, like the government's always been trying to salvage and mitigate the amount of damage it would have on its economy. Yeah. So it's tried a lot of different policies in the past, and some things might have helped or might have led to where they are right now. That part I'm not too sure about, but it's definitely they've been hanging around, and who knows like what one government has been talking to other governments behind the scenes to kind of salvage their economy. I don't think any government out there wants any of their economies to crash.
No.
that's really the key part of them staying elected, right? So there's definitely like some things they were trying to do, but it's just kind of like the bubbles burst.
Yeah, and I think what I find the most amazing, but of course, there's counter argument, but what I find amazing is that the recovery was so quick, right? I don't think it's a full recovery. I think I don't know which government, whether it's Bank of Japan or U.S. doing something to kind of ease that out, right? By
Yeah.
doing whatever they need to do to help Japan out.
Yeah.
That worked pretty quick. But of course, a lot of the more knowledgeable people on Twitter are saying, "Hey, we're gonna actually see the dead bodies, like maybe 1 to 2 weeks out, or maybe it'll slowly roll out in over the next few months because some of these
Right.
things don't implode or explode right away, right? They
Yeah.
might be slowly dying off and then trying to hold on for dear life type of thing. So I think that's very interesting too.
Yeah, I mean, back to like the Warren Buffett thing a
Hmm.
little bit as well. Like
Yeah,
for him to have sold his shares in Apple, as they are announced, they've already have a couple other things they're planning to
sure.
do. It's not just the
Yeah.
funds. Like he's never gonna really be sitting on like all the funds and do nothing with it. Yeah, he's taking some profit, great, right? But at the same time, people hold his shares or buy into his shares because
Hmm.
he or the team that's behind Warren Buffett's already planning the next move. So I don't. I really think it's just one of the things that we can see, and there's just many more things that he has planned that we aren't aware of.
Yeah, for sure. It's not like a willy nilly. I need to sell my stocks now kind of thing. It's more so.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
been planned out, right? They had
Yeah.
probably specific indicators that they were looking for. They all hit, or maybe a certain amount of them hit, and they're like, okay, now's the time to do it, right? And
Yep.
yeah, I mean,
Yep.
as
Definitely.
expected, as expected. Okay. Was there any other recent news items that you picked up on that you found was interesting?
Um, j- just just nothing. No, nothing. Nothing really. I mean, like I said, some of the news right now is all over the place. I
Yeah.
mean, one thing is you can still see on where was it on where was that part for like the Bitcoin ETF flows? I mean,
Oh, right. Yeah.
BlackRock is still buying like
Right.
crazy.
Right.
It's never in any of the last 2 weeks negative, right? It's been the same positive. Well, now yes, the other funds have moved
Sure.
around a little bit. I always kind of
Mm.
keep track on this to kind of let me think about, hey, what are the bigger players doing right now in the market? And
Yeah.
from what it looks like, the big boys are continue to accumulate, some days more, some days less, but they're still buying. So I think that's, important to point out.
Oh, for sure. And I think you bring up a very good point is I never would have imagined that I think we're talking about IBIT, which is BlackRock, right? Like,
Yeah.
I never imagined their clientele that are interested in a Bitcoin spot ETF would be so, as we would normally say, like diamond hands with it, right? In the
Mm.
sense that it seems like they've been almost as if educated to understand, or maybe they come to BlackRock with the understanding that the volatility is expected and they can stomach it, right? Which I find the most surprising because the speculation before the spot ETFs, or the worry potentially from some of the Bitcoin Twitter community was, oh, these people are going to come in and they're gonna freak out, once they see the slightest dip, and they're all gonna dump, and it's gonna be like just like reliving like 2022 or
Hmm.
whatever again, when we had retail bail out, jump out kind of thing. And to actually not see that happen, not to say it won't, right? I mean, it really depends
Yeah.
on how big of a hit we take. But given the BOJ thing, cash carry trade explosion, even before that, there was another dip that we saw. I forgot what the cause was or whether there was ever a narrative for it. But like I think maybe a few weeks back, we also dipped down to like 50, 51K, 52K or something like that.
Yeah.
Right. And
Oh,
then
that was the wasn't that part of the Mt. Gox? selling, and no, there was the country that Germany.
Yes, Germany. Yes.
Germany was selling, right?
Yes.
There's a whole bunch of stuff that came out at all at once. Germany was
Yeah.
selling.
Yeah.
Um,
Mount
I
Gox
forgot.
after. And
Mount Gox was
yeah.
or before, wasn't it? Mount Gox was
No,
before.
after.
Mount Gox was,
Germany
after.
first.
Okay.
And then the fear
Germany,
was,
okay.
it was very close, right? And the fear was that
Yeah.
Mount Gox would cause another price dip. But
Correct.
a lot of the people, I guess they guessed right. They're saying, hey, a lot of the people that were trading on Mount Gox back in the day, they basically automatically got diamond handed because of the fact that they had to wait for so many years before the lawsuit and the settlement to play out. And and they're saying that because a lot of those folks are OG Bitcoiners, you know, they're probably used to holding on to Bitcoin, and that was the speculation, right? No one could prove that. But what was interesting to see happen was after Mount Gox actually was, you know, the funds started being released and was fully released, inadvertently it kind of worked out that way. Like there wasn't really that much of a dip, which was kind of neat to see. Yeah.
Didn't also they get paid back out in fiat instead of
Bitcoin?
Or was that
there was a mix? There was like B Cash, like the fork off of Bitcoin. So depending on what those people owned during the time, they would then give you back whatever allocation divided by, I guess, n number of people claiming, you know, and then they say, oh, well, you had some Bitcoin, you had some Bcash, and they'll give you the corresponding ratio. Not exactly your original amounts, but it would be like, oh, there's like, say there's 20 people, you all lost money. We only have this much Bitcoin, we only have this much Bcash, so we'll divide it evenly. Or I don't know how they did it, or maybe by ratio of amount owned per profile. Who knows, right?
Yeah.
But yeah. So apparently there was sell-offs on the other, you know, altcoins, if we want to call that, if we want to be nice. But we didn't really see that much of a dip with Bitcoin whatsoever.
Yes. So like, I mean, going back to your point about like, you know, what news is like, you know, kind of made me think about Bitcoin more or less recently. It's hard because there's a lot of stuff that's coming out and like things like this, like I don't tend to dwell on too much in terms of like, you know, the so-called FUD, like, you know, the fear, uncertainty, and
doubt.
What was a D again?
Doubt.
Doubts, right?
Yeah.
Like I've kind of got desensitized on this whole aspect of, you know, scare. I don't know. I don't want to call it scare tactics. I mean, this is the stuff that sells on the news, right? So I understand where it's coming from. I just don't really care to think of it too much these days.
That's true.
And what I'm trying to look at more now is, and I don't want to sound cliche that, you know, just kind of looking for long term. I would say looking like the big players, right? Like what are they doing? You know, I mean, to me they are the house, right? What they plan to enact or do says a lot of what their plans are, and they have to be sort of transparent. Just because they have to uphold their standards to their clients, so they can't really do the what we think as the quote unquote shady stuff,
right?
You know, behind the scenes, if they actually have to sell to their clients.
Yeah, and then I don't know if you caught in the news or not, but when I say news, it's more so Twitter. There are the derivatives for the spot ETFs that are coming out soon.
No, I didn't.
Yes.
I didn't hear about
so the fear or the concern, it's not really fear, but I guess not everyone is even concerned. I think some people are very happy about it. More so, I guess, Wall Street or the traditional finance folks, because it allows them to do, you know, derivative leveraging and all that on top of the spot Bitcoin ETF price, right? And that's where I guess the folks who are concerned are voicing that that's just going to be more of a poop show, because our traditional financial system is full of these derivatives on top of derivatives on top of derivatives. And so what their concern is, well, you know, we had the spot Bitcoin ETF, that's great, that's working out well, and then also now we're allowing, or, you know, not really allowing, but also all these derivatives are going to come. And I think ultimately everyone knew that, right? I mean, the writing was on the wall. You can't stop Wall Street and TradFi from putting their, you know, typical strategies or whatever you want to call them into play,
Yeah.
right? They're definitely going to do that. That's where they make their bread and butter, by playing these games on top of
But
games.
there's nothing. Sorry to interrupt, but there's
Yep.
nothing wrong with that, though. I mean,
No.
that's just like in the stock market too.
Yep.
They have
Absolutely.
derivatives on top
Yep.
of derivatives, and people leverage to the yin yang to
Sure.
do what they need to do. Like
Yep.
if it is still a gambler's market, at
It
the end of the
is.
day, people are betting and making a, I don't know, educated guess, on what's going to happen. So I think people just have to come to terms, like, if the ETFs, which they have been now, like, been ongoing, Wall Street's gonna do whatever they can do to make money.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And so, I mean, yes, I know it's kind of shocking to see it on the news that,
Sure.
oh, this is happening and things like that. But yeah, like, it just kind of makes me think about, like, oh, okay, well, yeah, this is the next step. Of course, they're going to try everything under the sun to make money, right?
yeah.
Of course,
Yeah,
they're going to make
that's
their
expected.
clients
Right.
leverage and stuff. Well, that being said, like, I'm sure if your wealth is up there and you're like with BlackRock and stuff like that, their advisors are going to be like, hey, Mr. or Mrs. Smith or whatever, we're not gonna gamble your money away. Just hold this at 10% of your portfolio and just leave it be, right?
Right.
It's like it's the guys, like, and nothing wrong with this. The guys that want to go all in and YOLO and all that kind of stuff. Of course, they're gonna use these type of tools, which if it wasn't given to them by Wall Street, they would find some other way on some other website
Sure.
to do the
Yeah.
same thing. It doesn't
Right.
change that fact.
I think it's just that,
Yeah.
like, not to say that the concern isn't warranted. It's the way, you're right. It's the way the traditional financial system. That's the way the so-called, we call it a casino, right? Because that's
Yeah.
our view,
Yeah.
right? There's a lot of people out
Yeah.
there. They're like, no. Traditional financial system has lasted
right.
this long, and it's our market, and we can choose to disagree
Yeah,
or
yeah,
agree to disagree with
Yeah.
said folks, right? But
Yeah.
I think for me and you, we both see, the so-called stock market is just basically a casino. There's definitely a house,
Yes.
right? And whoever
Yeah.
controls the money controls the house, right?
Yeah.
And to that point, yeah, you're right. Like, for me and you, I don't think we're not concerned. It's just, I think for the people that are voicing it, they're saying, hey, once you add these derivatives on top of the spot Bitcoin ETFs, it's going to cause more weird stuff to go on. But honestly,
Yeah.
right, like, weird stuff's already going on. Like, the fact that BlackRock and all those Bitcoin spot ETFs that are buying, and the price is not moving, a lot of people have
Yeah.
called that out. They're like, hey, what's going on? They're buying so much. We see the inflows, right? Everyone can see
Yeah.
it, but the price ain't moving. So what's going on?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
been, I think, in part answered by various podcasts or even on Twitter, where people are saying, well, like, when you have all the ETFs that are basically storing their Bitcoins on Coinbase, all Coinbase has to do is basically just do their own in-house ledger update, right? They go, oh, here's a database entry. Oh, BlackRock, this much in today, this much out. Okay, here's the math. Nothing actually moves.
Yeah.
They don't have to actually go to the market to buy more Bitcoin, because Coinbase is the market. They're
That's right.
holding the majority of the Bitcoin that's in at least the US market, right? And that's
You're
all
right.
the ETFs care about, is you're the provider. As long as you've got enough to assign to my account or whatever profile, we're good.
Yeah.
Right. So it streamlines it, right? But at the same time, it also basically causes the market to not show those
Yeah.
fluctuations, which you could argue is good or bad. Some people might say, oh, that makes things more stable. Yeah. Then at the same time, you also don't see the price fluctuations that give you the upwards momentum, right? So there's the good and bad of it.
So another topic on this, a little bit of a tangent. Well, I guess just different, change of topic.
Sure.
So then, are we worried about the manipulation then, because this can cause? Because this is, in a way, in itself, a form of manipulation.
It
And
is.
so going forward, as Bitcoin is being bought up more and more by, BlackRock, or settled by in Coinbase or whatnot, they're going to have more and more. They're going to hold more and more. One of a few of the big players are going to hold a lot of it. I think that's
Yeah.
inevitable.
Yeah.
So then there is a chance then they will start manipulating prices to
Oh, yeah.
their
Advantage.
to their benefit, right?
Yeah.
I guess. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, how do you see that
Totally.
being a pro or con? Going forward.
I don't know if it's a pro or, I can't call that. Like,
Yeah.
there's definitely pros and cons. But what
Right.
I think is something that is inevitable. Both know that. That's like trying to tell them don't do weird janky stuff with stocks. They're like whatever, right? We own the stock market. We're going to do whatever we want to make money, and they know that when they mess up, they get bailed out. They all just throw a kerfuffle, and then they go to the Fed and go, hey man, print more money. Go to the gov and print more money, bail us out. Otherwise, all these people that we owe money to, they're going to be screwed. And so it's just basically socializing the problem, right? But there's no punishment. No one ever goes to jail, right? So same thing with this Bitcoin spot ETF stuff. They're gonna do it. We know it. We all know it, right? And they're probably already doing it. But here's the thing, right? Are we concerned? We can be. But there's the thing with, I think, with Bitcoin is there's this love-hate relationship, right? Where we want it to be popular enough that there's increased adoption, and the spot ETF supports that, right? It enables it. Now, definitely we can probably expect in the future what could be a black swan event. Well, let's say, for example, one of the spot ETFs all of a sudden they legitimately bought their Bitcoin, but Coinbase doesn't have it. They're like, hey, on the books, you're supposed to have this much Bitcoin, but on our side of the books, we actually don't have that many Bitcoin. Then what, right? So then it's not their fault, not the ETF's fault, but Coinbase would then be in trouble. And guess what's going to happen? We can probably surmise that they're going to run to the government and go, hey man, you got to bail us out. We need to make it good. So we'll probably have to get somebody to print some money and then pass it out and then appease everyone. Now that may or may not work, right? Obviously some of the bigger ones, like if you're brand name, you probably get more bailout than the ones that are not so known, but are still a spot ETF. Those ones are smaller, right? So they might go, we'll save the big ones and not save the small ones. Or maybe the way they distribute the coverage, it won't be as great towards the smaller ones. They'll justify it any way they want. And then at the end of the day, it'll be like, okay, well, that will be the black swan event. That will cause the Bitcoin price to dive, right? But it won't affect the people that are, diamond hand cold storage. Because
that's all.
Right. Yeah.
That's what you're right. That's one of the things I think would nullify it over a long period of time is that people that do believe it, hold on to it, would continue to grow. And eventually, even if the big boys play the market this way, they sooner or later will lose out bit by bit. Not, pardon the pun, to the fact that it's being accumulated up by the general masses, right? I think that's the hope, anyways. I think that's the way to kind of look for it to be positive.
Yeah, absolutely. To basically reword it, is basically every black swan event is a redistribution event.
Yeah.
Right? It goes through the people that understand what it is and are holding it and are storing it properly. I mean, the greatest concern with the OG Bitcoiners are they're like, maybe half of them, or I don't know how many, a lot of them like the spot ETF because it causes more adoption, awareness, right?
Yeah.
At the same time, the other parts of them are saying, hey, it's not safe. That's not real Bitcoin. That's paper Bitcoin, right? So we all know it. We all know the game, right? That's why it's love-hate. We want the exposure. We want people to understand, and we want them to actually buy the real thing, not the spot stuff. But the thing is, the spot ETF has been said on many podcasts and whatnot. It makes it easier for the folks that are used to traditional finance, right? And it gives them the exposure that after they hold it for a while, as long as nothing blows up with the ETFs, they get to see the returns. They go, wow, this is how it works. I get it now, right? And in theory, it should incentivize them to actually go and buy the real stuff. Because in theory, you could always sell your spot ETF that's gone up. It'll become cash because it's not in kind. It's only cash redeem, right? So they'll get cash back, but they can take their cash and then they can go buy real spot Bitcoin. And then they can cold storage. Because at that point, ideally things would be easier with the process. Less people will be fearful of screwing things up. There's still a huge responsibility in ensuring that they keep their cold storage safe, but there should be more services and companies offering like multi-sig where you distribute the risk, right? It's not just like, oh, I'm doing my own self cold storage, but like I'm doing multi-sig where one company holds a set of my keys, another company holds another set, and I hold a set. Makes it a lot safer, right? So as those things become more popular and more mature, that will enable those people to basically jump from the ETF to the actual Bitcoin itself. But the thing is, that's the thing, right? It requires a black swan event to force those people to do that. If the spot ETFs are run well, great,
Hmm.
but it won't be real BTC in those people's hands. It's always going to be paper. And one of the
Yeah.
ways when I explain it to people that ask me the question, why not spot ETFs? I don't have anything against them. It's great as an entry level gateway type of approach.
Hmm.
But again, it's not the real thing. And what we have to remember is the whole reason and the sole reason for the creation of Bitcoin. Very common question is, what's the purpose? What's the use case? The whole point is to separate, governments from money, right? Separate nation states from manipulating their own money. So by having
Yeah.
a global currency, and so basically that's the purpose. And there will need to be situations where it reminds people that if you continue to buy the spot ETFs and something goes down, the government, even if nothing went wrong and all the money is there, when you're ready to redeem and cash out, you're only going
Yeah.
to get the cash, which means you're always in that same garden, right? The financial system of whichever government that you're buying the ETF from, right? Just
Yeah.
like how there are U.S. Citizens buying the U.S. Spot ETFs, there are Chinese citizens buying the Hong Kong spot ETFs, which is for the Asia side. Their money's trapped in that pond. They're two separate ponds, right? And so
Yeah.
again, that concept of, oh, I own Bitcoin. No, you don't. What you own is paper promise. And sorry, I'm going on a rant a little bit, but one of
No,
the
that's
things
okay.
that I also, maybe my own perspective for sure, is the way I look at, like whether it's 401ks or IRAs or RSPs or whatever you want to call them, where they're
Hmm.
investment vehicles for a long term, but you can't spend it. It's like it's, you don't get taxed until you pull out of them or whatever. Those things, at the end of the day, those are promises, right? Obviously, knock on wood, we want our society to continue to maintain its level of civility and prosperousness.
Hmm. Yeah.
But there's nothing stopping a government that's not doing so well to say, hey, sorry, man, I got to take all of your savings,
Yeah.
right? And we got to use it to bail out the whole country because we messed up. That can happen. So there is no promise. There is no guarantee that just because anyone having any RSPs or IRA or whatever saved up, that they can actually touch it by the time they retire. Whereas with Bitcoin, as long as you hold it safely and you minimize your risk, it's yours forever. You could literally take it to the grave.
Correct, correct. But I do want to say, and quoting one of our mutual friends, if it did come down to the government seizing our assets, I think by that time the world has
Yeah,
ended,
that's true.
because
That's true.
we are fortunate enough to live in a country where it's somewhat uh, open, to
Yeah.
thinking and free speech and all that kind of stuff, which is
Hmm.
great. And if that were to kind of go down as well too, it won't really be a very good picture for anywhere else. I
Yeah.
believe, and that's I think that's part of it. Like you you're right. I think educating people to self custody is great, but at the end of the day, some people are going to rely on the government to do their general day to day things. Like just because we have a good sound monetary system for people to do trade, there's still a need for organization of public health, public schooling.
Hmm.
As much as those are different topics that have their own problems, the
Hmm.
majority of people would still need it. I would kind of relate it to, kind of, it's not a topic that I want to get into here either,
Sure.
but it's like religion, right? There's a
Hmm.
place and purpose for it.
Yeah.
I would consider myself probably atheist at this point, right?
Sure.
But the fact is, I also understand that there is a need for it for
Yeah.
certain people, and rightfully so, right? People are
Agreed.
entitled to what they believe in, right?
Hmm.
And so, that being said, yeah, the government has these things, and as much as we should be holding our own Bitcoin, uh, there is still going to be a lot of people, and still going forward, people that just want to invest, park their money somewhere, will grow, and they don't want to worry about any of the so-called self-custody things at whatsoever. I mean,
Sure.
just getting them in onto Bitcoin is already a
Right.
huge huge change in mindset,
Right.
right? I think only like from my really just from my point of view, as of right now, as it looks, a lot of people are just going to stick with the ETFs,
Oh, sure.
if at that.
Yeah.
And if you're telling them, and even then, right? I mean, great, at least there are people kind of holding something that's more resilient to the long run fluctuations. I just don't see a lot of people really going into holding the
No.
cold
Yeah.
storage. Yeah,
Not right
I
away.
just think that's it. That's a big part of it.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like saying why don't all the rich people, all the millionaires, all buy Bitcoin right away? Because there's no need, right? If you're
Yeah.
well off, there's no, oh, I'm doing great. You got the money glitch going for you in the fiat system, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's no immediate rush.
Right.
Most of them aren't worried about their wealth, but if they were put in a different situation or country where it's not stable and they needed to get out of there ASAP and they needed to move their wealth with them so that they can take it with them, Bitcoin would be the way, right? So
Of
it
course.
always depends on what the urgency is. What's the need, right? If the people
Yes.
have no need, they're not going to study Bitcoin. They're not going to care. Whereas
Yeah.
the poorer countries, where they're like under authoritative regimes, they can't escape or it's very hard. Those people will be the ones that adopt sooner, and that
Yeah.
makes sense. That's very
Yeah.
fair, right? Because
Yeah.
that's the thing with Bitcoin is you may not have to understand it, but if it ends up where you're like you don't have much of a choice and you need something that is transferable or usable globally, you're gonna strive for that, especially if you're trying to flee wherever you're trying to flee. But if you're
Yeah.
living like posh and life is good, you're not gonna go and study Bitcoin. You're like, why? The
Yeah.
Ponzi scheme, right? Why I gotta go study that? So it's you're absolutely 100%. It's if there's no need, there's no fire burning your feet, no one's gonna bother. So that's okay. Like with the spot ETF, going back to that, like they, it's great. Like it gives the exposure. The folks that are used to the traditional financial system, they can learn the cycles of Bitcoin because, as we both know, it takes a minimum 4 years for anyone to even see the benefits. Right? It's not. It's interesting where there's a 4 year cycle, and then every 4 years there's a halving. But more
Yeah.
importantly, is having to live through all the ups and downs, right? The bull markets and the bear markets, right? And fully understanding that to some degree, right, it does kind of repeat itself. Maybe not absolutely it's the same because there will be different black swan events all the time, but the way in which there is this new adoption wave that comes in because now the price is even higher this cycle, and then there's going to be a big black swan event, whatever it is, or multiple, and it'll cause the price to dip down. And I think what Bitcoiners usually look for is, well, if it drops, is it at least higher than is the low point still higher than the previous low point? And if it is, then we're still trending good, right?
Oh yeah,
You know,
I think that's true for any type of investment. I
mhm,
think that's what people that actually helps people sleep better at night as well too, knowing that they're already ahead of the game,
right,
and no matter how bad things get, they have something. I think that's why people go to gold and stuff, right? They
sure,
have that mentality like, oh, this is like a rare asset commodity, and no matter what, I will still have it valued at something.
hmm,
Just that gold is, as we know, it's hard to move around,
yeah,
it's hard to divide and things like that. But people recognize it, and I think that's where Bitcoin is ultimately heading to. Like that's what
yeah,
I think that we both agree on that point. It's gonna, like they say, it's the digital gold. It's gonna replace that and then some because it has
hmm,
other aspects that gold or other monetary means systems that don't quite have it together.
yeah.
So yeah, I think that's yeah. This I think it's a good part. We should end the um, cast for
Okay,
today.
wrap it up. Sure,
Yeah,
sounds good. Sounds good. All right,
so I
we'll
can
we'll end it here.
get this set up. Yep.
All right, thanks a lot. Talk later.
Yep. Thanks. Okay. Talk later.
Hey, bye.
Bye.